All right, we are on. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Weekly Dose with Dr. Uday. We are going to be talking about a sensitive topic today, and this is how to handle a family member, handle the situation of a family member that's terminally ill. I have the expert with me today, so we're going to be getting a lot of information, a lot of good and well-needed information. And this is actually good for both the patient and the physician alike. So I'm very excited about this. So before I get into what I have today, I'll start with introductions. So for those that don't know me, my name is Dr. Uday. I'm a board-certified family medicine physician. I'm based in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I own a primary care practice, namely Apple Valley Family Medicine, and I also own an aesthetic practice. And my goal is to not only have my patients feeling good, but looking good. So let's get right to it. So I have Dr. Delia Chiamonte here with us today. So excited. So I'll give you some information about Dr. Chiamonte. She's a founder and CEO of the Integrative Palliative Institute. And she's also the host of Integrative Palliative Podcast. She's board certified in family medicine and palliative medicine. She's certified by the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine, and her goal is to train 1,000 physicians in integrative symptoms management because every patient deserves an effective and joyful physician. What an amazing goal. That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Very exciting.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yay. So let's get to it. So this is a really sensitive subject on both ends, and it's very important that it's handled accordingly. So first question, what do you find in that I guess family members are dealing with when they have someone in the family that's terminally ill from your perspective?
Sure. So there's a lot of emotion, obviously, in the family when someone is very ill. And I would say there are two big things that come up, and maybe they're related. One of them is that everyone is on eggshells. Nobody wants to make the other person sad. And so sometimes, just at a time when families should be coming together, they're kind of off in their own corners because I'm feeling sad, but you're my sick loved one, and I don't want to cry in front of you because I don't want to make you sad, and they don't want to cry in front of me because they don't want to make me sad, and now we're all a little bit separate. And that doesn't have to happen. And
Right.
so I think that's one big thing is just the idea of everybody together, like holding hands together during this difficult thing, as opposed to going into your own corners. That's one.
So when you come into that situation, how do you handle situations like that?
So that brings me right to two. That's a great question because I think the biggest thing for people is they don't know how to talk about it, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
when we don't know how to broach a situation, that's when we hide, right? And so we're in our culture, we're not that comfortable talking about illness. We're not that comfortable talking about death. And so we just don't, right? And then we all separate. And so it can go in two different directions. Sometimes the family member doesn't want to talk about it, and maybe the patient does. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the family member's like, okay, we got to talk about this, and the patient doesn't want to. And then the family member doesn't know what they're supposed to do about that. So working on the communication around all the things, like what is your diagnosis and what are the doctors saying, and do they think they can cure it or not? And if not, let's really talk about it. Like, what are they thinking in terms of your lifespan? And let's even talk about what happens at the end. What are you worried about anything? Are you thinking about death? Are you afraid of that? So instead of talking about it, we're so scared to talk about it, thinking somehow like if I talk about death, it'll happen.
Right.
And so then it separates us. So I really do think that getting comfortable with communication as a family, bringing the family together is one of the most important things.
So then what would be actionable tips that you could give our listeners who are in this situation, trying to handle, a terminal family member? What tips would you give them to handle it?
Great question. I think I'll take it from two sides.
Sure,
One
sure.
is what if the family member wants to talk about it, but the patient doesn't?
Okay. Mhm.
That happens. That definitely happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can make conflict in the family. Like the family member will say, "Come on, you have to talk about it. That doctor said, come on now." And the patient themselves is like, "No, I don't want, get away. I don't want to talk about it." So for that, I would say the first question is it really urgent that we talk about it right now? And
Mm,
sometimes it's urgent, meaning the person's not safe. Maybe they have dementia and they're not safe to live alone anymore. And we really have to have the conversation about what will we do to keep you safe. In which case, you do have, it's okay to push it a little bit. You can sandwich it. You can say, I know you don't want to talk about this thing. It's really hard to talk about, but we have to talk about it because there's a safety issue. And then when we're done, we're going to stop talking about it and then we're going to go out to lunch. So
mm,
if it has to be talked about for safety reasons, or maybe like you're there in the hospital and the surgeon says, do you want the surgery or not? We have to decide by today. In those cases, you push a little. But a lot of the time, it's not urgent to talk about it. Maybe the family member wants to talk about it, but the patient does not. And in that case, it's okay not to talk about it. You should back off a little bit. And we should think about,
yeah.
do I, as a family member, want to talk about it for myself because I need to talk about it, which is a very valid need, but
Mm,
maybe can't be filled by the person themselves. So then you have to take that need somewhere else. Talk with a friend, with a loved one, with a counselor, with a doctor. But if the patient doesn't have to talk about it right now and doesn't want to, then we as the family should back off a little bit. So
so
that's,
yeah. And then from the other perspective.
and then from the other perspective, we this will seem like the most simplistic advice. You
Mhm.
gotta just talk about it. Like, say the words. And you can even practice saying the words separate from the person who has the illness in the bathroom. Like, say, "Mom, are you afraid of dying?" Say it a few times. "Mom, are you afraid of dying? Mom, are you afraid of dying?" Get the words out of your mouth because those are not words that we say. So practice them a little bit and then go to your family member and ask them.
And
So
this, oh, I'm sorry to
no, no,
interrupt.
go ahead.
Of the the patient wants to talk about it, but the family member doesn't want to talk about it.
So often nobody talks about it, so we don't even know if the patient wants to talk about it.
God.
So what you can say is you could put in little threads if it feels safer. You can say, "Hey mom, if you ever want to talk about, really hard and scary things, you can talk to me about that."
Mm.
I would really recommend that anybody check in with themselves. Do they mean it? Like, can they handle it? And if they can, that they throw that offer out. Because often what happens is the family member is willing to talk about it, the patient's willing to talk about it, but nobody says anything. Like
Nobody's brought
nobody knows that it's okay to talk about it.
nobody's brought it up. So then I guess my other question then becomes, when do you come in? When do people consult, a specialist like you in this situation, I
It's
guess.
a great question too. And it brings up actually a very important concept, which is that palliative medicine, palliative care is completely misunderstood, even by physicians. So, palliative care is symptom focused care, meaning physical symptoms, emotional symptoms for people with serious illness. That's
Okay.
it. Even if you're trying to get cured, even if you're getting aggressive treatment and you're hoping it will prolong your life by a long, long time, if you have symptoms, physical or emotional symptoms, and you have a serious illness, palliative care is appropriate at diagnosis. So that means if you have a cancer
Mhm.
and you're trying to get cured, but you have pain, fatigue, nausea, anxiety and stress, family conflict, those are all symptoms. That would be appropriate to see a palliative care physician. And,
God.
and people really misunderstand that. They think that palliative care is the same as hospice, which means it's end of life care, but that's completely not true.
Wow, thanks for dispelling that myth then. So I'm going to actually switch gears, and this is going to be a question about you. So I usually ask, why do you do what you do, Doc?
Oh, I love that question. Um, I do what I do because I think that every single one of us, if we're here on earth right now, no matter what anybody has told us we deserve to feel as good as we possibly can feel so that we can get the most juice out of life that we can, all of us. And I don't care if you're 15 or 95. I don't care if someone told you had cancer or not, or you have dementia or not. If you're still breathing on this earth, you deserve to feel as good as you possibly can so you can live your life. Because if you have pain, you don't want to go out to lunch. If you're nauseous, you don't want to play with your grandkids. And so it's so important to improve people's symptoms so they can live their life. That's why I do it.
So awesome. The other question, and this is like completely unrelated, is what would you tell your 20-year-old self from all the experiences that you've had looking back?
Oh, I love that question too. So good. I would tell my 20-year-old self not to worry so much, not to worry what other people think of me, not to worry if my life's going to turn out perfectly, not to worry if I gain 5 pounds, that there's so much depth and honor and meaning and connection and love in this world, and that's what really matters, and all the rest of it is garbage.
I love it. I love it. So I always ask that question because there's always someone listening that, is probably in that scenario and could benefit from that. Thank you so much, Dr. Chiamonte. This was awesome. So then I guess the last question is, where can people find you?
Great. Yeah, people can find me in multiple places. One is my website, which is integrativepalliative.com. Integrativepalliative.com. I do have, as you said, a podcast, the Integrative Palliative Podcast, which is in all the podcast places, Apple, etc. And that is targeted to either clinicians or people just interested in medicine and illness and well-being and how to live your best life when you're facing a serious illness. So I have a lot of people who are not clinicians who listen maybe because they have a condition or their family member has a condition. And of course, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those places too. And if anybody has a question, just send me an email through my website. I would love to connect.
That is awesome. You guys have heard it. So, find her. Guys, share this if you can, because there's definitely people out there that could benefit from this video. And for any of you that are looking for a quality primary care physician, we are accepting new patients at Apple Valley Family Medicine. Our number is 304-350-1087. And you can also catch us online at www.applevalleyfamilymed.com. Thank you so much. You guys have a great week. Bye.